as I just, for a moment, glimpsed a glimpse of a glimpse of a glimpse of what it is meant to be. Someone who is at the heart of a genocided people trying to lead them, the Chinese, and the whole world, by his example, out of the lunacy that is afflicting it. I turned to Pete and said, "What is holiness?" And he gave me the most stunning definition. He said, "Holiness is knowing just how much your shadow and your ego is affecting you at every moment." And I thought, of course, at that moment that I'd have no hope of being holy because I had no shadow and no ego. No, I wasn't that stupid, but I knew. That is the most perfect definition, because it is the definition that combines the crucifixion and the resurrection in one experience. If you are going to birth the divine human, my friends, you're going to have to be both the crucified Christ and the resurrected Christ at the same time. And if you look at the royal representations of the resurrection, he doesn't come back as some Brad Pitt radiant being, blonde and perfect with Brad's body in Troy. Why am I obsessed with this? He comes back. Jesus, forgive me. And I know you have. By the way, what's going to happen to the fundamentalists, I know this because he told me this is a lie, but I will go with it. They're not going to be sent to hell, although there's a big temptation up there to say, for God's sake, let's burn the Rotterdam. They've invented this terrifying hell. Let them go there for a week or two and see where they've consigned the whole of the rest of humanity, okay? But they've overcome this temptation in heaven. What's going to happen is that they're going to turn up. Jesus is going to send his swishiest archangels to meet them. And these archangels are going to say to them, women and men, you know, they'll morph. They'll say, "Darlings, you got it so wrong. So wrong." Jesus has no problem with us. Honey, he hung out with the lowlife, and you know why he did that? It's because they're so much more interesting. And then what they're going to do is that these swishy archangels are going to take them to a very comfortable library out of which they won't be able to go until they've read all the sacred mystical texts of all the revelations. And as they read it, they'll be lit up by the light of the cosmic Christ, and it will be revealed to them that all these revelations are part of the great evolutionary work of love in reality. And then when they have got this, they will be invited out, and a great feast, like the prodigal son's feast, will be, and everybody will dance and dance and dance and dance. And those swishy archangels will put on Tina Turner. I have seen this.
Thus saith the Lord.
Thus saith the Lord. And I know exactly the Tina Turner things that they're going to play, but I'm not going to tell you because I can't reveal it all at once. It would be too nice. I'll give you one of them. It's simply the best, better than all the rest. That's the one that they're going to be singing around the resurrected Jesus. And he'll be singing back to them because it won't be about him. He'll be singing it back to them because they did the work, right? So it'll be a great occasion, and I expect to see you there. What happened was that after the film was made, I went back to Paris, and where I was living, every young man should live in Paris in his 30s. This is what's going to happen in the birth of the divine human. Because to be young in Paris, oh my Lord, it was so wonderful and so healing. And when I got back, I heard that Bede was dying, that he'd had a series of heart attacks 2 days after the film was completed, and that this was certainly final because he was 86 and his body had been totally ravaged by huge, huge heart attacks. And I knew that I had to go back because I couldn't bear. Excuse me. I couldn't bear never seeing him again. And I wanted to be with him and to help in any way that I could, in any small way. Little did I know that he was going to help me, even ravaged and with half of his mind destroyed. He would help me in ways that I am still trying to comprehend. So I did go back, and I had the incredible honor of being with him as he went through other heart attacks, holding his body as this glorious, Christed being went through some final agony to try and transmute the pain of the world, because that's what I'm convinced he was doing on his deathbed, or was being done in him, offering yet another level of sacrifice through his surrender. And I would spend night after night with other people in the ashram, by his bedside, trying to attend to anything that he needed, holding his hands, stroking him, wiping the sweat from his forehead, being with him. And something happened during that time which was so extraordinary for me and for all of those who were there. And it gave me an insight as to what John and Mary Magdalene must have experienced at the crucifixion, and Mary. Because I think what happened to them on a cosmic scale is what happened to me on a much, perhaps on the same cosmic scale. Why should we always diminish ourselves? Can you imagine being Mary Magdalene, loving him so much and so completely, and seeing him on that cross, seeing her beloved tortured? Can you imagine John loving him so completely with his whole heart, mind, and body, seeing him hanging like a rat, bleeding? Can you imagine Mary, who had done so much already for the world in accepting the enormous burden of bringing him into the world, of accepting the agony that he must have gone through as a child, of accepting being turned away from when he had to evolve, of accepting all that she went through, and all that she went through inwardly, and all that she must have gone through inwardly, seeing his ministry excite such opposition, knowing that he was carrying this evolutionary gene, this new consciousness. And think of Mary at the cross looking at her son, whom she knew was the divine human, having to go through this. Any mother, any lover, any friend, anybody who has ever loved anybody with their whole being can taste some part of her cosmic agony and know, my God, my God, my God. And I experienced that, as did the other people who loved him, heart, mind, and body, as we saw him dying, knowing how little we could help him, and knowing that this was his final crucifixion and his final resurrection. the work of the divine human is not for sissies, because the birth of the divine in matter is the most grueling of all births, because it's the most amazing. And when things are that amazing, and the goal is so comprehensive, the work has to be total. And Bede was doing that total work up until, and of course now, from beyond the end, because he's an eternal flame of the eternal fire, and he is with all those who love him forever and ever and ever, as all the great resurrected ones are. And this night, I was by his bedside and I was stroking his hands. He had beautiful hands. He was so beautiful. He was 86 and completely thin and gaunt, but with this extraordinary face like a white lion in a human being, like a majestic lion, seared but peaceful, absolutely peaceful, and absolutely radiant, so radiant. And even when he was ravaged by pain, he was radiant, because nothing could extinguish that radiance. And that night, I was stroking his hand, and he said two things to me, one of which I've already shared with you. He woke up and he looked at me and he said, "Are you simply stroking my hand, or are we traveling every moment deeper into love?" Which to me is the absolute instruction for how to live every moment of this life. That's it. If I can remember that, I can go on evolving. And I do remember that, because every moment with you, I've tried to go deeper. Every moment that I meet a person, I try to make that moment be a moment of traveling into love, because he gave me that instruction. And he didn't give me an instruction. He exploded my heart with love. That's what he did. That's what Christ did. Does. And then he sat up in his bed, naked. And he seemed to see a divine being. And perhaps it was Jesus or an archangel, I don't know. Whoever the heaven it was. He saw the divine in the open door, and he gazed with this expression of inexpressible ecstasy. And he said over and 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 over again, he said the four words that have been the absolute key to everything that I do, everything that I know, everything that sacred activism, I believe, is truly deeply about. Everything I believe that the message of the cosmic Christ is trying to convey to us at this moment. He said again and again, serve the cosmic, serve the growing Christ. 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 Again, with different emphases, every word exploded from within by love. And as he said this as a kind of divine mantra, every time he said it, another level of illumination came to me, and I realized that he was saying three absolutely amazing things, all interlinked, that came straight from the heart of the real resurrected Christ's transmission. He was saying, serve the growing Christ in you, Andrew, and through that to everybody, to you, serve the growing Christ in you. Realize that you're on the earth to give birth to the embodied divine, and do everything that you can. Go through everything that you have to. Suffer everything that is sent you. Pray, love, give, do the work, do it all, give it all, because it's all about birthing in your mind, in your heart, in the cells of your body, in your genitals, in your stomach, in your neck, every part of you, the divine passion of compassion that is divine love. Serve the growing Christ. That's the first thing. And the second thing I knew he meant was serve the growing Christ in the world. Because the world is going through this cosmic dark night, this global dark night. Bede knew it because he'd been through it himself, and his prophetic intelligence had awoken him to what was happening and the meaning of what was happening. And he knew that if there weren't millions of people who knew the cosmic secret of the dark night giving birth to the embodied divine, he knew that the human race would be threatened by madness, by desolation beyond imagining, by absolute terror and absolute paralysis before the immensity of the process that has to happen to purify and irradiate a shattered humanity. And he knew that what was required were people who, like him, in his humility and in his agony and in his tenderness and in his brilliance and in his purity, had dedicated themselves wholeheartedly to being midwives of this tremendous birth. And he was saying to them all at that moment, gazing at the divine itself, serve the growing Christ. Risk it. Go for it. They won't love you for it. They didn't love him for it. But you'll be supported by God, and the angels will come to you as they came to him in Gethsemane. And in your darkest ordeals, you will not be abandoned by divine grace. In fact, you'll be flooded with it on levels and in intensities that you cannot even begin to imagine. And that is true, because everyone who goes through an inner dark night, as everybody who will go through this dark night, who turns to the divine, will find that their lives will be flooded by vision and revelation and grace beyond anything that they can imagine, because the dark night of the Godhead comes upon the human race with two things: with a sword that hacks down all the structures and fantasies and illusions of the false ego, but with a rose too. In the other hand, the rose of the feminine divine, which inebriates you with the mystery of your own divine identity and floods you with ecstasy and revelation and love. And everybody who has been through this experience will tell you the same thing. That was the second thing that he was saying. Get up, get going, do the work, radiate the passion of the Christ and radiate the passion of divine love in acts of justice. Become, in the words that I gave to it later, sacred activists. Do the bloody wonderful work. Do it, risk it. This is the time. This is the time of the birth. You have to turn up, please, please. God, turn up. Please turn up. Serve the growing Christ. And be absolutely amazed with joy that you've come into a time in which this tremendous mystery is offered you as an amazing opportunity for you to grow beyond imagining, and as a task for you to take on in the name of the beloved, because it's only by taking on this task with total commitment that you will ever be able to birth the divine in yourself. Because you don't just sit back and become irradiated by grace. Grace is given, but you have to earn it by your total abandon to it so that it can penetrate you at ever greater levels. It's a circular action. Am I getting across to you, or am I just sitting here entertaining you? Am I getting across to you because I want to get across to you, because if I fail to get across to you, a huge opportunity for grace in your life will be missed. And that would make me very, very sad, because I can't think of anything that you and I need more than to really see both the tremendous pain that's involved in this, but much more importantly, the enormous possibilities that are really being given to us. How much God must respect us if God is willing to enable us to go through this evolutionary transformation. God knows why God respects us so much. I am waiting to find out. But I think it's probably because God is living in us and knows the secret of our true identity far better than any of us. Something like that. The third thing that Bede was suggesting, and I think this gets us to the heart of why it is so important for the message of the real Christ to come through, of the resurrected transmission of the divine human to come through at this time. And I'm going to try and say it as simply as I can. The universe, the whole cosmos, is interconnected. We know that. The great revelations of all of the mystical traditions have been about interconnection. Perhaps the most amazing revelation of the Buddha, who was, of course, a tremendous spiritual genius, is the revelation that he gave us of the codependent origination of everything, that everything is interconnected and arises interconnected in the universe and inter-affects and affects everything else. So both being is interconnected because the source is one, and everything that is created is interconnected at the most profound level because it's all emanated from the source. It's all crystallized light energy. But the very way in which things arise from the source is also interconnected. And if you want to have an inner image of what this is, think of a Bach fugue. Think of the later Bach fugues. And as you listen to those amazing direct dictations from Christ consciousness that are put down by Bach at the end of his life, as you listen to them, what you're actually listening to is the way in which reality arises is in this interconnected fugal ecstasy. And you can have glimpses of this in mystical truth. You can suddenly realize that the gesture of the person across the hall and the flower blooming and the sound that's coming from the back window are all interconnected in a mystery of codependent arising. It is all a bubbling of the one in fugal rapture. So, if this is true, and it is true, and one day millions of people will know this naturally, because the tyranny of a scientific degradation of reality will be over, and science itself will be a servant of this tremendous knowledge, which will vastly improve science, because, as the Dalai Lama once said to me, my God, why don't they respect me as much as I respect them? Why couldn't they just go and meditate for a year somewhere and see what happens to their vision of science? Just as I have studied science and revere science, why don't they do the work and find out what would happen to their scientific vision? It's not going to diminish the scientific vision, it'll only illumine it. Right? If this vision is true, now you see why the birth of the divine human on this planet, in this matter, is so important. Not just to this planet, not just to this earth, but in secret miraculous ways to the whole of the cosmos. Because if the birth can take place here, as it must take place, it will inevitably radiate out and resonate out. Rupert Sheldrake has discovered this amazing law, and I think it's a direct reflection of this magical understanding that the great mystics know, the law of the morphogenetic fields, the law of the 100th monkey, in other words, that if 100 ants in Sumatra learn how to do the tango, by miraculous immediate osmosis, ants in Kamchatka will be doing the tango very soon afterwards, because on the interconnected webs of intelligence that are the real magic of the universe, that intelligence is communicated instantly. So no awakening is ever wasted, even though you think, my God, as I often think, nobody's listening, nobody cares, it's all mad, why don't I just go and listen to Tina Turner for the rest of my life in a log cabin with occasional afternoons of Maria Callas? That will fill me. But of course that's just Andrew the idiot and the egotist talking, because the truth is that if any of us awaken, at the very moment that we awaken, the awakening happens in the DNA of the entire race, and in the entire animal race, and in the trees, and in the flowers, because this is all one immense interconnected web, right? So now you're beginning to glimpse, I hope, what is at stake in this birth, and why it is so devastatingly hard, and why the powers that don't want this birth to take place are so ruthless and so devastating and so murderous. If you look at Revelation, which is an amazing document, and read it as a Rorschach test of the birth instead of a fundamentalist document, oh my God, that's like reading St. John's Gospel as if it were a fanatical dogma, which they also do. And if you read it, then you really understand where we are, because in Revelations, there is an amazing passage about the virgin being taken to a desert on the back of an eagle to be protected from the dragon that wants to destroy the birth. The dragon are the powers in the universe that do not want the universe to be divinized. They're essential to the divinization process. They don't actually know that. They're essential because they whiplash you. They reveal to you your own darkness. And when you fall for their lures and seductions, they show you how implicated you are in the defeat of the divine. And of course, they're part of the divine and being used by the divine in this wild, mad alchemy. Once you get that, you realize that it's now, where we are now, is that the baby is out of her light vagina. The birth is taking place. The divine human has been born in Aurobindo, it's been born in Bede, it's been born in the mother, it's been born in many people we don't know. It's happening on the earth. The union of heart and mind, body and soul, masculine and feminine, spirit and matter is going on. It's going on in me. I know I'm far from any kind of integration of it, but I know it's real. And this is the most dangerous moment of all, because the baby is being born, but it's still so fragile. And the birth of this baby is going to influence the life of the whole universe, irradiate the whole universe. And that's why the struggle is so devastating. And that's why those of us who have been initiated into this evolutionary truth are so urgent in the way that we speak about it, because we know that it's not only humanity that's at stake, it's not only nature that is deeply, deeply threatened. It's that if this does not happen, a great dream of God will be defeated. And there are those who say, when I say that, how could a dream of God be defeated? And I'll tell you exactly how. Because now it's time for me to announce that I am the avatar. You laugh. For that laughter, like Kundry, you will wander 1,000,000 years. Are you kidding? I just see if you're listening, baby. The reason why it could be defeated is because divine love has given us free will. Because evolution at its greatest and deepest level can only work between lovers, beloved and beloved. And because we are free, even at this late moment, even with this glorious information, to turn this down and to choose suicide. But let us be aware that if we choose as the human race suicide, it will affect the life of the whole cosmos, and a dream of God will be incinerated. That's the degree of our responsibility. And when you begin to glimpse it, you are awed by two things. You are awed by the majesty of the divine's patience with us, and you are awed by the majesty and holiness of the responsibility that God has given to this most fragile and astounding part of His creation, us. So amazing and so extremely dangerous. So those are the three meanings that I have been working on in the core of everything in myself that came from that night. And Bede, who gave them to me, is with us now. Because every single saint and every bodhisattva and every shaman and every mystic and everyone who has ever tasted any of this wine, and all the angels and archangels, and all the dakinis, they are all with us now. And they are all trying to wake us up. And they're all pouring grace down upon us. Because they know what is at stake. You have so much help. Wake up. Do the work. I want to end by sharing with you the other experience of the Christ that has been at the core of everything that I'm trying to give you. And before I do so, I just invite you to take in peacefully now, into your bellies, into your minds, into your hearts, those words of Bede, serve the growing Christ. Just take them in. I don't know how you're receiving this. How can I know? All I can do is to give it to you in the name of my beloved. You may just think this is fascinating information. I can't prevent you from just thinking this is fascinating information. You may be longing to go and watch your taped sets of Golden Girls. And I don't blame you, I love Golden Girls. No, don't let me knock Golden Girls, I'm crazy about Golden Girls. But I'm trying to give you the whole map of human evolution as I understand it. It's very, very important, and if I fail to express it well enough, I'm sorry. Darling, go if you like. You shall be forgiven because you loved much. How do you feel about this information? Just give me a few words so that I can end with this, with what I have to give you.
I don't know why you were saying just now if you had failed, because I just feel that there's almost no, I don't know if I've heard anyone so lucidly, dynamically, comprehensively, fully encapsulated and revealed where we are and what, in all its dimensions and all its fullness and where we need to go and what we need to do. So I just feel this enormous gratitude. I don't think for a minute that there's anything real in what you're saying about am I communicating the message?
You always have to ask.
Yes, you do.
Because if I didn't ask, I would be in my own trip.
Yeah.
I have to hear what you feel. Because I need it. I am not up here, singing. I have to feel it to realize what you're feeling. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yes.
I love your tears. Tears really matter.
Yes, they matter.
I know that,
Tears are the birthing waters of the
and
divine
the
human.
sweat of the love
Yes.
between bodies.
Yes.
There is a divine spark in every drop.
Yes.
I love you.
Thank you so much.
And all that here, all beings.
Thank you, Anne. Yes, sir.
I feel to say that the revolution that you're talking about, it's also happening within an element of the church.
Yes.
And I know the church that I attend here in Nashville is a very socially active church, and very inclusive. And I was amazed that I could find a church in the tradition that I grew up in that respected and honored teachers outside that tradition that I've found, including yourself, that have inspired me and connected with my heart. And I think it's important to honor that element.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much. And please invite me to your church immediately, because I'm dying to talk to them. And
we have a woman priest.
that's a very good start. No, I want to say I think that's a very important thing that has just been said. He's saying, I think there are people waking up in the Christian tradition now to this immense possibility, and they're doing the work. And I think for a long time, what I've been saying is true, that they were in that, but I think that this leavening is happening, and I really want to serve it, and I would love to serve it. And I'm planning, in fact, to speak very much more to those churches and those movements within the church, like the independent Catholic movement, which are really going to want to grapple with the mystical tradition in this way and the cosmic Christ in this way. So please don't take my ferocity as a lack of openness. I am dying to meet people within the tradition who really want to do this work, and I will do the work with them and learn from them.
I think we need, in our defining of the Christ, which is what we are, the goodness, the good, good, and very good that was present in the garden.
Yes.
We also need to redefine what is the Antichrist.
Yes.
And it is not a person that
No.
we've been told to watch
It's-
for.
it's the-
anything that's against the Christ.
Yes. Inside oneself.
Inside, in anything.
In
it's
anything,
the three
yes.
levels that you talked about with Father Bede. It's the same thing. You've
Yes.
got to look for those things that are against Christ, individually, collectively, globally, whatever
That's
it is.
it. The Antichrist. The Antichrist is the mad shadow within each of us, and then the energies that the indulgence and the orgy of domination and fury and hatred that creates in the world. The Antichrist is not a person, although the energies can use people.
Right.
And I think that there are people who are being used by those energies. And I think we also have to say something that Jung was saying at the end of his life, which is that the Christ and Antichrist come together, and the Antichrist energies are a part of this great birth for several mysterious reasons. And one is that if they weren't exploding, we would never be driven deep enough into a passion deep enough to incarnate the full energies of the Christ power, right? So it's not that the Antichrist energies believe they are against the Christ, and that's their whole motivation, right? To destroy, to degrade. But in the overall mystery of the alchemy of the one, they are actually serving the birth, potentially, because they, in their abandoned fury and orgy, will bitch slap the human race awake to realize that if it goes on indulging this shadow, it will destroy itself and everything, and if it doesn't go through this tremendous transformation, it will miss the whole point of its evolutionary history. So this is a tremendous dance of opposites within the one.
I read a book.
Am I making sense to you? Yes. This is a very scary kind of way. It's scary because it's so overwhelming, but nobody can understand the divine alchemy. The keys of the unseen are in the hands of God alone. But you can come to understand through your experience of your own Antichrist and through your experience of the Antichrist energies in this terrible cabal of corporate domination, media vacuity, absolute paralysis, total dissociation, total desacralization of the earth, you can experience that and realize, my God, this is potentially either the end because these could destroy everything, or the beginning because they are powerful enough now, blatant enough now to really get people up their asses and going, because more and more will have to awaken as the catastrophe is deepened, created by these Antichrist energies, to the necessity of putting mystical love into sacred activism on every level. You see how it works? This is the great dance of divine history. Yes, sir. What's your name?
Clay.
Clay. Hi, Clay.
Hi. I feel like I stumbled through this, but first I just want to say I just love you so dearly because I thought, like, I'd only experienced like real love. We adopted a former fighting pit bull who had experienced the worst suffering, the worst abandonment, the worst cruelty. I mean, it makes the crucifixion look like Sunday school with this poor dog.
I doubt it, actually, but I think Sunday school was definitely not part of the crucifixion because his heart was crucified, you see.
But he still loves with his whole heart. I've never seen like anything get so excited for a can of dog food. And it's just pure abandoned love with all of his heart. And I always thought, there's no human on the planet who could endure this type of abandonment and this type of suffering and not either go mad or commit suicide. Right. And I thought that until I met you. And so thank you, because I kind of talked with you about this a little yesterday. Thank you for choosing the world and choosing suffering, you know, because you could have gone off to the Himalayas to meditate and, you know, but you chose us, you chose suffering, you embraced it with all of your heart, you had your heart torn out, so you could just love us with complete, wild abandon. And the world needs you and your message so much, so I just love you so dearly, and thank you so much for bringing this to all of us, and just to continue bringing it, and feeling like I'm not reaching anybody, and nobody's listening to me, and that has to be so incredible, but you just keep doing it. It's so easy to close yourself off to love and to shut yourself off when you get hurt, and you just keep exposing yourself to that hurt again and again and again, and just keep making it, you just love more and more and more through it. And I've been so inspired by what I've seen in you. It's really just like kind of ripped my heart open, because I've just experienced like a fraction of that suffering and abandonment, and it just caused me to retreat for years into myself. And I don't know how you've been able to go through that and just keep standing naked in front of the world, just exposing yourself to all this suffering and still just keep loving. I just find it so amazing and so inspirational. So just thank you from the bottom of my heart. With all of that I am, just thank you so much.
No, I'm going to go forward now because we only have 10 minutes and I'm never going to extrapolate again in public. Ever. Ever. I love you, but I've got to finish this. Now, thank you so, so much. But I want to say to you, and I really mean this, there are no gurus in this new adventure. You have recognized this beauty in me, and because you have recognized it in me, it must be in you. You can only ever love and admire in the beautiful, holy way you've just loved and admired me if it is so burning and so holy and so beautiful in you. So you must take back the golden shadow that you projected onto me, which I wore beautifully for about 2 seconds, because I have never had such a loving compliment paid to me by anybody, and I salute you for it. You must take back the golden shadow, and you must realize that the real message of the cosmic Christ to all of us, of this great love force to all of us, and especially of Jesus to all of us, is, don't adore me. Or do adore me, but realize that when you are adoring me, you're adoring the best in you. And go on and discover just how much the beauty that you see outside is living inside you as your own deepest truth. And this is what Bede gave to me, because I adored him, really adored him, and I adore him. But at the end of his life, he completely shattered me by saying to me, he said, you adore me, he said, but you're going to go much further than I've gone. And even my vanity couldn't even begin to imagine that, right? I thought, I'm pretty good. But here I was with a living Christ, and he said to me, I love you loving me, and I love you eternally, but you're going to go further. And I have never, ever, I don't believe that, but what he was doing was saying, this is something that we are in together. And the great teachers of the future, the great teachers of the evolutionary future, are not going to be gurus claiming omniscience and omnipotence and all the rest of the bullshit, because the truth is that if you're in this laboratory of evolution, you're so ragged and so flayed by the real demands of the real process, and you're so constantly exposed to your own unhealed shadow, because there's always more healing to do, always a more radical humility to enshrine, always more love to pour out, that you can never claim to end the process. It is a boundless, endless process. And the only way you can stay sane and grounded in that process is to stay always on your knees, aware of what in you still needs transformation. So do not trust anybody who is in a state of authority over you, who does not say to you, as well as he or she can, what I've just said to you. The great evolutionary pioneers are the humblest ones, and I'm far from that humility. But it is crucial, because what they give us is something far more than authoritative knowledge. What they give us is something far more precious. They give us the results of their research in the laboratory. They give us the signs of the birth as they raggedly and bravely struggle through it. And that is so much more important. If you go to a great singing teacher, for example, like Callas went to Elvira de Hidalgo. Elvira de Hidalgo was dealing with the greatest voice the human race has probably ever heard. She didn't sit about saying, you're great, and nor did she say, I'm great. What she did, and Callas has written about that, is that she said, these are the difficulties that you're going to get into. This is how you will have to arch your voice to sing this phrase. This is how I did it. And this is how I sweated to be able to do it. And I didn't always do it very well, as you can see from my recording in 1921, right? But I tried. And let's work on it together. Because that's the real love. And that was Jesus' love to his disciples. That's why they were all so mad about him, because if he'd been some rotten guru sitting in the lotus position saying, I know, they would never have loved him that much. But he was ragged, and he was humble, and he was heartbreaking. And he really reached out of his continuing struggle to incarnate the divine to help them. And that figure is far more moving than the one that the churches have adopted, the static Jesus. Jesus is obviously evolving right through the Gospels. Every day is a new birth, and every day is potentially a new mistake. That's the truth of the process. And that's the truth of the evolutionary process. And that's the truth of what I'm discovering, and that's the way I teach. I don't teach from omniscience. I teach from continuing discovery. And I teach from my mistakes and my failures, because If you're going to take this journey on, you're going to fail often, and you're going to make terrible mistakes, and that's fine. Do you think those fish on the, you can imagine in the New Age version of the fish transformation to the bird, there is the fish, okay, we're going to just envisage what I'm not going to go into all of that anymore, but you jump onto the sand, and you just go through a minor difficulty for a weekend, and you become a bird, right? No! The fish writhed and struggled and didn't breathe in the right way, and then some of them died, and then the others said, no, we don't breathe like that, we can't, because it won't work, right? They endured the horrible beauty of the real process, and they exchanged information. That's how it is. And that's thrilling. And that's the end of hierarchy. And it's the beginning of sacred relationship. The end. Calamity Jane in the Deadwood. I'm going to share with you. No, it's not the end. I'm going to judge. No, God, are you kidding? While I'm here. Do you know Deadwood, the great? Yes. And do you know Calamity Jane in Deadwood? Yes. She has this, I'm not going to say the whole phrase because it's naughty, but she always is saying, the end, when she makes a definitive statement. It's so beautiful. And Calamity Jane, I've wept at the grave of Calamity Jane and Wild Bill Hickok. They're some of the most wonderful people. They at least live their lives with some brio. No tofu about them, my God. Oh. We need a bit of that spirit, but in a divine way coming back. We need the outlaws of God to return, the Wild Bill Jesuses to be around, and the Calamity Mary Magdalenes to arise. Let's have them all come around again. I just want to leave you with the vision that really birthed sacred activism, and it was a vision of Jesus. And I want to invoke his presence now. Because I'm not speaking of something that I haven't seen and haven't experienced. I don't know, nobody who has ever seen him knows why they could be given such an incredible grace. You can't, nothing that you could ever have been or done if you'd climbed the Eiger in hot pants or founded a Holy Just Society or whatever it is, or written the Ninth Symphony, nothing could earn this. It is grace. So I'm not saying I'm somebody special, because when you have this kind of vision, you know you are nothing, but you know that God loves you infinitely enough to give you this glory. That's it. You know you're nothing, and you know that through the grace of God, you're initiated into the everything. And you have to preserve those two knowledges together, because otherwise you get inflated or crazy. And the New Age is full of both. My father was dying in the place I was born, Coimbatore, in 1997. And my mother, who is a formidable lady, and whom I very much resemble, so... and I love my mother, and she is bossy. And she could teach ravens to fly underwater if she chose. And she sent me a telegram and she said, get your ass over here, your father's dying, no talk of politics or the empire or anything. You come back, you love him, he loves you, and he's dying, you've got to come right now. So I knew that this was a direct telegram, of course, and I couldn't refuse. And anyway, my father was the most patient and humble and gentlemanly of people, and he, although we had disagreements about things, I knew he loved me passionately and profoundly, and he knew I loved him passionately and profoundly. The fact that he was conservative and read the Daily Telegraph, and that I was this, God knows what I was, just put in any word, mad word you want, did not stop him adoring me and did not stop me adoring him. He was a fantastic human being, so humble and so beautiful and so kind. And I went back to Coimbatore and I spent a week with my father as he was dying. I seem to specialize in deathbeds at this moment. No, because death is such an amazing moment. Death is when the whole being opens and you can read in the book of that being everything that they have given. And lived for. And my father did dying in the same gloriously beautiful and humble way that he did everything else. He was so kind and transparent, and his Englishness vanished a little, and this love poured out from him. And we talked about many, many things. We didn't talk about politics or the empire. Most of all, we talked about Jesus. And I realized from the beautiful and holy way that he was talking about his relationship with Jesus, that in so many ways the great sage that I'd been searching for had always been at home reading the Daily Telegraph, drinking half a glass of scotch every night. And that part of the extraordinary gift of his dying to me was to realize two things: that I had been roaming the earth, gone to the Himalayas, been to see the Dalai Lama, God bless him and everything, and met, of course, Father Bede, but that at the core of my own life, all my life, had been a man who was holy. Amazing. And I had to realize, too, that for all of my raggedness, I was the boy of such a father. I was his son, and therefore must have him inside me. It was such a tremendous blessing, because I always thought I was so much like my mother, that I would never be as serene or peaceful, as grounded as him. And the likelihood of any of those things happening is slim, but it's a lot more deep now that I know that he lives within me, and I feel him so strongly, more and more as I age. I came to Coimbatore on the Tuesday, and on the Sunday I went to church. I went to the Church of Christ the King, which is Hindu Christian churches. I mean, Christian churches in India are like Mexican and Hindu kitsch, absolute masterpieces of marzipan nonsense, you know. It's wonderful, I love them. And I'd been a page boy in this church when I was 7 years old. I'd been a page boy at my aunt's wedding. And I remembered it quite well because the night before I had slid up and down the red banisters of my grandmother's house in my satin page boy suit, and I had a huge red stain. And so the whole ceremony, my grandmother, who was even fiercer than my mother, had told me to stand with the back to the altar so nobody could see this ultimate disgrace to an upper middle class English family that I was rapidly becoming. And thoroughly enjoyed being later, yes. Very extraordinary happened that is the birth of everything that sacred activism is trying to be. An Indian priest got up after they had read for the gospel Matthew 25, which to me is the greatest thing that Jesus was ever said through him. And he said, this beautiful, humble Indian priest, he said, Jesus is the mystical king of reality, not because of the extraordinary miracles, but because of this vulnerable, abandoned love to all beings that he lived out, and because of his passionate giving of all of himself. And because I was being flayed alive by my father's dying, but also being irradiated by the beauty of his soul, I heard that in a completely intense and focused way. It went through me like a spear. And when the priest sat down, I looked up at the statue of the resurrected Christ at the end of the church. And for 15 minutes, that statue became alive, and I saw my beloved, I saw him. And I stood there, and it seemed as if it seemed as if you're always trying to mitigate the absolute outrageous beauty of the revelation, you know, because we're so scared of saying these things. But from his heart to my heart flowed this flow of molten lava, golden fire. And it seemed to take a knife and just hack my heart open, and at first it was terribly painful, and then when I just surrendered, it was beyond anything ecstatic. And the fire that was released by that shattering open of my heart, much smaller fire, joined his torrential fire. And lover, love, and beloved were one fire. This immense experience of being permeated with divine love passion in every cell of my being by my beloved, and recognizing the most astounding revelation of all, which is coming to all of those who love him and all of those who love the beloved by whatever form, which is that we are the beloved of the beloved. And the beloved hungers for us as much as we hunger for the beloved. And I was sitting next to my brother, who's a wonderful banker. So I knew that my brother has put up with quite a lot of madness in his life, as far as I'm concerned, but also he loves me, but I didn't think that he was quite ready for me to turn to him and said, look up, there's Christ appearing at the end of the church. But I couldn't help being convulsed by sobs, because when this happens to you, there's no way in which you can hide the rapture. I was just sobbing. And so he said, Andrew, very sweetly, he said, go out now. So I left the church, and it was towards the end of the service. I went out, and then the second part of the experience, desolate and lonely and abandoned beyond anything that I can describe. And I went to him, and I gave him the money that I had on me, and I looked around for people to help him and brought them. One advantage of being British in India is that you can put on your English accents and people still remember the old days. You know, there I was saying, look, we've got to do this. And we helped him and lifted him up. And as he was lifted up, he looked at me. We didn't speak. He looked at me, and just as I had seen my beloved in crucified resurrection and resurrection crucified, I saw the beloved's face in his face. And I saw the Christ in him. And I realized that the most terrible aspect of what we are doing to ourselves and to the earth is that we are crucifying the divine in us, in nature, in everything. And this is a blasphemy and an abomination beyond anything that any poet, even Rumi on heroin, could describe. So, and then I heard a voice as loud as thunder, and I want to stress to you, I am not a person. I've had 5 or 6 visions in my life and very few really intense auditory experiences. I've had a lot of minor mystical experiences, but I am not somebody who spends their entire day wandering from realm to realm. I'm in this world, but this world is illuminated by many others. And this voice, which I knew to be the voice of my inner Christ and of the Christ and of the cosmic Christ, this voice said, you have been playing with your mystical experiences. You have been playing with your gifts and your brilliance and all the rest of it. You have used all of this to decorate your ego. And don't you understand that the world is burning to death? And that this man whom you've gazed into his eyes, don't you understand that the suffering that you see in him is in billions of people who are living lives worse than dogs, is in the animals that are being tortured and destroyed in their habitats, is in the fish that are being polluted in the polluted seas, and in the psyches of humanity that are being ravaged beyond imagining by a world gone mad. Don't you see this? And you've got to see this. Because there is only one question that will be asked of you and of everybody who has come to be born in this time. There's only one question that will be asked of you, and that question is, what did you do while the world was burning? What did you love enough to risk giving your life for? You won't be asked, did you see the light? You're not going to be asked, did you have wonderful, gorgeous, mystical experiences? You're not going to be asked, did you read Sri Aurobindo in the bath? You're going to be asked, what the hell did you do when you began to know where humanity is and what's at stake? And the voice went on, and at the end it said, you have got to give everything now. You've got to go back to America and you've got to do the work. And whatever it costs you, it doesn't matter. You have got to go through whatever you have to go through to get so much humbler and so much more focused. And you've got to give a message that will wake people up to the necessity of putting love into action. And you've got to give your life for this, because now you know who I am. And everything that I've tried to share with you this weekend, and everything that I have done since then, has had that broken man's eyes staring into mine, that rapture in the church infusing my body, and that thunderous voice keeping me real. May it keep us all real, and may we all serve the growing Christ. And I dedicate all that I've said to Father Bede Griffiths. And I beg all those who may ever see this to plunge into his work and to come to know the greatest evolutionary mystic of the Christian mystical tradition. So let's stand up. I'm going to read to you, to thank you, one incredible poem. Oh, and this is for Clay, because he was so sweet in what he said, and for all of you, of course, because he said it out of this whole experience. This is a poem by someone who knew the absolute healing power of the authentic Christ fire. A man called St. Simeon the theologian, a man who lived the birth, because in the Christian mystical tradition there are several who have known this. He's been birthing away. Now is the time for the big birth. But we've had a few fish already change into birds. And Simeon was one of them. And this poem is about the entire transformation. It's about the transformation of the mind, heart, and body. The miracle of the bodies coming into the fire and burning. The great miracle. The resurrection miracle. He didn't just do the resurrection to show us he's the Son of God. He did the resurrection to birth the resurrection miracle in each of us. What a boring vision of Jesus that is. Away with it. This is from my heart to your heart. And Nancy and I will have to go now because we've got a 7-hour drive, so please don't feel abandoned. I would sign books for a bit. But this is really my heart to your heart, and the great mystical tradition that comes from this tremendous revelation from someone who knows this truth. We awaken in Christ's body as Christ awakens our bodies. And my poor hand is Christ. He enters my foot and is infinitely me. I move my hand, and wonderfully, my hand becomes Christ, becomes all of him. For God is indivisibly whole, seamless in his Godhood. I move my foot, and at once he appears like a flash of lightning. Do my words seem blasphemous? Well then, open your heart to him, and let yourself receive the one who is opening to you so deeply. For if we genuinely love him, we wake up inside Christ's body, where all of our body, all over, every most hidden part of it is realized in joy as him. And he makes us utterly real. And everything that is hurt, everything that seemed to us dark, harsh, shameful, maimed, ugly, irreparably damaged, is in him transformed and recognized as whole, as lovely, and radiant in his light. We awaken as the beloved in every last part of our body. May millions of us know this beyond the shadow of a shadow of a shadow of a doubt. Because this is the birth, this is the divine human, and this is the great, great hope in the middle of the great, great darkness. So don't clap. I love you. Do the work. And let's meet again soon. You know where I am. I'm on my website. Just write me a letter. I'd love to know from you, and this means a lot to me, if you would write me a letter about how this teaching has affected you at my website, andrewharvey9@earthlink.net. It would mean a huge amount to me, because I need to know how this reaches you. So would you do that for me? Just write me. Speak to me. I've been pouring myself out to you. Send me what you are learning. And may the force be with you. I can sign books here.
I teach writing and literature at a university in Cookeville, Tennessee, and
You love it?
yeah, I do, and I'm actually pursuing another degree in theology now. Here at Nashville. And your host here, Rabbi, he's written a book about recovery.
Yes.
But come here.
Yes.
You keep talking together. And earthlink.net, you want us to write you letters?
Yes, Andrew Harvey at 9 at earthlink.net. But look on my website, you see my... Thank you.
Andrew, I need you to tell me the pitch so I can read that.
Bitch slap the world.
Keep me going.
Bitch slap yourself first.
Okay.
Because we have to be regularly bitch slapped by ourselves.
Right, I know that.
And then get up and just lovingly but firmly say this is bullshit, let's get on with it,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
It was amazing.
It was. For me.
Oh my God! Somebody who's been reading! Oh!
Can I just tell you? Yes, of course. You're such
Can we just sit here like harem lately?
And I want to own the projection. And that, just that I see in you an embodiment of a naked heart, and a vulnerability, and a passion that I get glimpses of in myself. And I just hope one day that I'll live into the embodiment that I see in you.
But you're doing it in your own way.
Yes.
That's the thing, isn't it? Beautiful. What's your name?
Doug.
Doug. Beautiful. I think this is the first straight transmission.
Yes.
No, really. I think that's why the friendship between the evolved gay man and the evolved straight man is so important, because it's the gay man can sometimes mirror the straight man's hidden passion and vulnerability, and in their love they can interfuse. And there's a lot of healing that goes on in that.
I feel that.
It's very important.
I envy the emotional fluidity that you have.
Well, I long for the stability and sense of certainty that a straight man has by being straight.
Huh.
So that the straight man can communicate the stability to a gay man, the guarantee of being... You've never thought, I'm a disgusting human being because I'm straight, because the whole world has told you being straight is the normal thing. But a gay person wrestles with that terrible humiliation at a deep psychic unconscious level. So when he has a deep friendship with a gay man with a straight man who's noble and truthful, that certainty can go into him, and the emotional truth that he's learned from suffering can go into the straight man. So there's a wonderful marriage with it.
It's beautiful.
Does that make sense?
It does. I wanted to let you also know that I've been to such an
Did you ever meet him?
No, unfortunately,
He was
I
dead.
began the path after he passed, but I certainly, oh my God, the light and the love that I felt there.
Oh, he's so
That's the man we almost become in our 80s, radiating that degree of splendor and presence. And that is so important.
Actually, would you sign this one to
There's a dad touch here. There's something happening in that child. IS or IZ? She looks so serenity. I imagine you just see unserene moments, but it's so amazing, isn't it?
No, if you look at my pictures, I was giraffe to the left.
Perfectly safe. Just kind of checking out She's radiant and she's been so unbelievable. I think it was so brave of you to bring her because
We registered the green bottle light.
one of it stayed straight. Yes, my mother. His name's Sarah. She gave me this card.
Oh, you look like a teenager, baby.
My mom's deceased.
I wouldn't like him, though. But I like her baby. All fair. It's the light!
You're going to be in there with the mirror. Yeah, that's gone.
I don't know.